Hi, I'm Richard from Early Retirement Wanderlust, and it's the first Thursday of the month, so it's time to talk all things well-being. And I've got another book review for you, and this time it's quite a contentious title, The Art of Being Brilliant. And what this book claims is being brilliant, successful and happy is not about changing yourself, but it's about finding what works for you and just doing more of it. Morning. It is the first Thursday of the month, and can you believe we're already 2 months into the year and spring is about to spring? And I just wanted to do a very quick book review. This book, The Art of Being Brilliant by Andy Cope and Andy Whittaker, is a tiny book. It's really cheap as well. I think I picked this up for about £10, but it's a really entertaining read. Now, if you are after a blueprint or a flowchart of what to do, or in terms of self-help books and things like that, it's probably not for you because it's a quick read, but you do have to sort of try and digest it. There's a lot of anecdotes in there. There's a lot of reflection points where you have to think about your own life, but I really quite like that, and they do it in an almost comedic sort of way, and some of the real life situations that they bring up in the book really make it easy to resonate with my life and hopefully your life. So as I said in the introduction, it is quite a contentious title, The Art of Being Brilliant, and that sort of title cringes on me a little bit, and I don't quite know whether that's because of my upbringing or whether it's generally a sort of a UK based thing, because we don't generally talk about being brilliant, but that's something that we're going to talk about later in the video when we look at a major concept of the book, which is the curse of mediocrity. But looking at the summary of the book, it's quite a strong claim that being brilliant, successful and happy is nothing to do with changing yourself. It's just examining where your strengths lie and doing more of those. And it's a really common sense approach. So what I want to do in this video is pull out probably the 6 main messages from the book, think about how they've illustrated it in the book and how it's perhaps changed my way of operating within my day-to-day and my normal life, and look at some of the ways that it's brought value to my life. The first major learning point will come as no surprise because it is all to do with our choice of seeing things in a positive way. And that absolutely resonates with me, and that's how I try to live my life. Living a life of optimism and gratitude really does help underpin everything else that we do in life. I'm a great believer in what you choose to focus on, you tend to get more of. And the book absolutely backs that up. And it all comes down to a simple bit of brain science. Our brains in the modern world can only cope with so much information, and we have a way within our brains of filtering out things that are perhaps unimportant to us, but they might be important to other people, and that is the reticular activating system, which really does just act as a filter. Now, the book gives a really simple example of that. The author was traveling on a journey with a friend, and that friend was absolutely obsessed with high-performance sports cars. And throughout the journey, they kept referring to these cars that were passing by. Now, because the author had no interest in that, they hadn't even noticed that those cars were passing by. But it's the fact that that information is out there and we choose to attend to the information that we see as important. So that choice can be really simplified down into whether we choose to see positive things or negative things. Now, I'm a great believer in going out and looking for the positives in everything. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but if we are flooding our system with positivity, optimism and gratitude, then we are more likely to see those positive things that are occurring around us. And likewise, if we have maybe a glass half empty approach, then we are only going to be focusing on the things that are negative, the things that annoy us, and by focusing on those things, we're more likely to attend to those negative things that crop up in our life further down the line. And a lovely little theory connected in with that is what the authors call the 90-10 rule, where 10% of our life we have absolutely no control of. So in their words, life can be and 10% of the time those things are going to happen to you in life, but 90% of the time we have a choice as to how we perceive those situations. And I think this is a really pragmatic approach, because sometimes people want to sort of belittle positive thinking because, you know, not everything goes well in life. Bad things are going to happen, but we have a choice as to how we perceive those bad things. And I've spoken an awful lot on this channel about how I really believe that out of trauma can come growth, and no matter what life throws at us, we have that option to take the positives out of it, and there are always positives to be gained from any particular situation. The next thing the book encourages us to do is to understand the impact that we have on other people. Things in life trigger us, and they trigger an emotional response. So like we said about the 90-10 rule, 10% of life can be negative, and that can actually trigger emotional responses within us. We could be part of that 10% problem, and we need to understand that we potentially have an impact on other people. So we could have a positive impact on them, or we need to be really mindful that we could have a negative impact on them. So if we accept this idea that we do have an influence on other people and their emotional responses, then we have to go out of our way to just make sure that we are entirely positive with people. Now, one of the really positive things that I've taken away from the book for a number of years is random acts of kindness. This is where you just go out of your way to help other people in really random and probably quite small ways. So a classic of ours is based around the supermarket. So if you are waiting to pay at the checkout and you've got a whole trolley load of stuff and there's someone behind you that's only got a couple of items, we'll always ask them to go through because there's no point them waiting behind us. Likewise, when you go to pay the person at the checkout at the supermarket, it's always nice to ask them how the day's going and thank them for the service. These little things are going to influence those people in a really positive way. And whether it reflects back on us or not doesn't really matter, but what we're actually doing is we're creating a much more positive environment around us. And if we can keep doing these random acts of kindness and making people happy, then we are more likely to be surrounded by happy people. And if we're in a happy environment, then that's going to be a positive environment and we're less likely to see those negative things. So it's almost like a cyclical thing, and it's hard to establish what comes first. But if we can go through that process of understanding that we have an influence on others, providing kindness to people in a random way, then it's going to have a huge effect on the environment that we live, and it's therefore going to make us feel much more positive about the way that we live our lives. I really like the pragmatic nature of the book, and the next point is that we have to take responsibility for our own actions, and by that we mean we have to take responsibility for our happiness. Transformation doesn't happen by chance. We have to be intentional about that. And a prime example of that is if you were going to the gym to get fit, you wouldn't expect an entire transformation to occur after your first workout at the gym. It takes time, it takes persistence, and it takes practice. And we have to take responsibility for that. So just the same way as if we want to get fit, we have to take responsibility by going to the gym regularly, we also, if we want to take responsibility for our happiness and success, then we have to accept that that's going to take some time. The book cites two really practical examples of this. The first one is a theory by Richard Wilkes, and it's to do with a sausage making machine, because a sausage making machine is a really simple way of processing meat, and the quality of the sausage that comes out at the end is really dependent upon the quality of the meat that's put in at the start of the process. And that's really a practical example of how we live our lives. If we are going to be putting more positive approach into our lives, if we are going to take responsibility for our own happiness, our own health, making sure we eat well, making sure that we sleep well, then we are more likely to get really positive outcomes at the end of the sausage making machine of life. Whereas on the flip side, if we just put a load of rubbish into the sausage making machine or life, then we can't really expect anything but negative outcomes in the end. Again, in a really pragmatic way, the book emphasizes the importance of bounce back ability, or really resilience, and just in a pragmatic way accepting that even the most positive people have not so great days. And again, it's a reminder of that 90-10 rule, that life will throw 10% of things that we have absolutely no control over, and probably things that we don't particularly like. So no matter how positive we want to be, those things are going to happen. It reminds me of like a particular interesting anecdote when I saw this author speak, and he talked about the life of unicorns and rainbows, and he said that even unicorns have moments of diarrhea. And I think in rather sort of a graphic way that sort of illustrates it, because no matter how positive we want to be, bad things are going to happen. So therefore we have to develop some resilience and some bounce back ability for those things that are inevitably going to affect us in life. And one thing that resonated with me was that we wouldn't want to be happy all of the time. There are certain moments in life where it would be entirely inappropriate to be happy, and we wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want that magic pill to keep us happy all the time. So, you know, funerals, they're not happy places. They are times to be sad, and there are times in life where it's okay to be sad. And if we can accept that even the happiest people are sad at times, then that's a huge step forward. And a lovely little phrase they used was, it's okay to have a bad day, but it's not okay to have a bad life. And as long as we are aware that it's okay to have that bad moment, but to not allow those bad moments to just keep compounding on each other, and have a really good understanding of impermanence in the fact that everything in life will change and everything will pass. So, you know, if we're having a really great time at this moment in time, we've got to accept that further down the line, the wheels might come off. But likewise, if things are going really badly at the moment, then those bad moments will end and things will inevitably get better, which is, in effect, bounce back ability. Now, regular viewers of the channel will know that I absolutely love my goal setting, and this next bit of advice is to do with goal setting. And interestingly, it says we all need a HUGG, and by the HUGG acronym, it means we all need to set huge, unbelievably great goals. And I guess this is all about just dreaming big. If we don't have that, then it's really hard to make sure that we maintain a purpose in our life. And if we can't dream big for ourselves, then how can we expect others to dream big for us? And I think this is particularly pertinent for people who are early retired like myself. When I early retired from my teaching job, I felt that there was a real risk that I could lose my purpose in life. And one of the reasons why I continue to goal set on an annual basis and review it quarterly and do all of the same process of when I was in work is that it helps me make sure that I keep that purpose in my life. And you know, I want to live a fulfilled life. And this idea of huge, unbelievably great goals ties into the concept that I referred to at the start of the video, which is the curse of mediocrity. And I think sometimes in our culture within the UK, we are sometimes cursed by mediocrity because we are encouraged to hit the middle ground. In reality, we're not encouraged to take risks. So an example of this probably comes from my professional life, where I spent my time preparing young people for examinations. Now, examinations at GCSE and A-level were all about hitting that middle ground. There was not really a massive amount of scope for really extending study and taking it to a brilliant or excellent level. It was just about meeting the standards, and students were encouraged, and I encouraged students to make sure that they worked hard to get that middle ground of a GCSE or an A-level certificate. And what the kids focused on was really just not failing. They were desperate not to fail. And I think if we apply that into our lives, if we spend our life thinking about desperately not trying to fail at things, then we're not really going to put ourselves out there and extend ourselves and live an exciting, vibrant and sort of fulfilled life, because we're just going to be trying to avoid that failure. Whereas if we go out and we set ourselves really aspirational goals, then we're going to be constantly chasing it, because if we miss those goals, that's fine, because part of the process that we'll have been through, it will have made us a better person. And the book cites some really interesting insights from David Taylor in his book Naked Leader, where he just talks really pragmatically about this whole goal setting process, and that we shouldn't be too obsessed with small smart goals, but we should be thinking about where are we at this moment in time, where do we want to be, what do we want to do, and then finally the fourth point, just actually getting on and taking action. And quite often, I think in the past, I've spent so much time strategizing and almost procrastinating about where I want my goals to be, and didn't actually just get on and do it. And for me, the final learning point from the book is that we need to play to our strengths. And what was probably more important for me was an acceptance that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes that can be really hard to get your head round, and it's something certainly I've struggled with throughout my entire life. So accepting that there are some things that we're not particularly great at. I know that I'm not particularly great at singing. I also know that through 2 years of Duolingo, I'm not particularly good at picking up languages, and I'm certainly no good at dancing. But being able to accept that and realize that I have so many other strengths that I could really focus on, the book encourages you to really focus on those strengths and put your efforts into maximizing those strengths so that you can become a real expert, and at the same time accepting you have those weaknesses, but not actually putting too much effort into improving those weaknesses. And I guess again, it's that curse of mediocrity. When we think about trying to hit the middle ground, I think probably in my life I've spent too much time trying to bring my weaknesses up to be that sort of middle ground of slightly less rubbish, whereas actually I would have probably been better at spending my efforts at really focusing on the things that I was good at and really pushing those passions and those strengths. And as an ex-teacher, a lovely story that they used in the book was about the animal school, and it was a school where all the young animals went to learn to be better animals. And not surprisingly, the fish were really good in the swimming pool, but they weren't particularly good when it came to climbing trees. And the birds were amazing at flying, but again, they weren't particularly good at burrowing underground. And that simple story just almost turned a page for me in terms of thinking about the things I focus on in life and pursuing those things that I am really interested in, and consequently the things that I actually get to be really good at. So that's it from me. I hope that you have enjoyed my review of The Art of Being Brilliant. It is a lovely little book. It's not particularly expensive. As I said at the start, it's not particularly intuitive. It's not like your typical self-help book, so it doesn't necessarily provide that blueprint, but what it does do is gives you various points to reflect on, and loads and loads of practical examples of things that you can take away from the book and apply to your day-to-day life. Obviously, if you are a regular viewer to the channel, you will know that I firmly believe in the power of positivity, and all this book has done is just reinforce that. For me, it's $10.99. It's a really entertaining read. It's one to have on your bookshelf and to just keep going back to, but I'd thoroughly recommend it to you. So that's it from me. Have a good week. Have a good month, and we will see you again at the start of April.